SuperTalk Mississippi media production. Middays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. Middays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Middays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Hump Day.
It's a hump day where we have a ceasefire. And you know what that means? Oil down, the market's up. Good news to report there to you. Crude oil trading $17 a barrel lower than its close yesterday, and that puts it at $95 a barrel. That looks a lot better than when it's got a 1-0 or a 1-1 handle in front of it there. And that's because the president says we're calling the dogs off. We're making progress on our negotiations with whoever the heck the regime is now. It's hard to keep up, isn't it, Rhino? Because our incredible military's been taking them out. I'm not sure who's in charge. I have a theory, by the way, about why they've been a little more accommodating. I'll get to that in a second. But stocks are surging while the price of oil is plunging. Now, mind you, at $95 a barrel, that's still 40% higher than it was before this war started. Whatever you want to call it, conflict. I guess technically we can't call it a war because the Congress hasn't declared war, right? This is an operation conducted at the orders of the commander-in-chief. I believe he refers to it as an excursion, if I'm not mistaken. But we're playing shoot 'em up, that's for sure. And again, the Dow up, it has been up over 1,200 this morning. The S&P up 2%, 138 points. The NASDAQ, it was up over 700, now 561. But, man, that looks a lot better than that red. That's all I know. The question, of course, is will this stick? But the Democrats, they're just disgusting. I really do feel like that they don't want Trump to succeed here. They're pulling against the country. Is this hyperbole? Am I being extreme here? Am I exaggerating?
No.
I don't think so either. This is disgusting. It's incredible. And they're all talking about invoking the 25th Amendment. He's a madman. Now, look, I'll agree that perhaps the language on Easter, a little harsh. Maybe even this rather radical suggestion in his post yesterday that civilization's going to end in Iran. Surely nobody thought that was the case, that this was, and this is where I'm going with my theory, by the way.
I mean, the crazy people on the left were convinced it was going to be nuclear Armageddon.
They sure were. That's exactly what I was thinking. They absolutely believed that he was going to launch a full-on nuclear attack in the nation of Iran, the home to 93 million people, and obliterate their entire civilization.
Now, if the Democrats weren't so allergic to patriotism or the American flag or giving a rip about this country and its actual citizens, then you could spin it as they were so hysterical that they convinced Iran that it was going to happen.
That could be.
But Democrats have lost that benefit of the doubt because they are allergic to patriotism and the American flag and giving a rip about the country and its people.
And do they not make it somewhat easy to conclude that opinion, that position, because of their history in the last several years, once again, of coddling criminals, of vilifying victims, of prioritizing illegals. Yes, they're illegals. Somebody jumped on me. They're not illegals. Don't use that word. They came into the country illegally. Thus, that it is totally appropriate and proper to refer to them as illegals. Why are they so wrapped up in words as well? Which just, I think, further shows just how weak-minded you are when words. Oh, my gosh, you used the wrong pronoun. It's the end of the world. It's incredible. And that's the way these people are.
Because they have to play on emotion, knowing deep down, even though they're unwilling to admit it, that 95% of everything that comes out of their mouth cannot be backed up by logic.
That is totally true. Logic and rational thought have left the room when they start talking. So my theory is this. I think that what remains of the regime and those in charge, I think they know that this country, its military, has most incredible capability. Again, you know this, powered in large part by artificial intelligence. Again, something mostly created in this country.
Well, that's one facet of it.
It's a huge facet, but
I mean,
and there's been other.
You have that. You have the shock and awe of the Maduro raid, sending ripples around the world geopolitically. You have their proxies in the region getting their butts handed to them by Israel since the October 7th attack. You got a lot of different things stacking up that when you look at it and you're not deranged with Trump derangement syndrome, it starts to make sense how, well, people have been talking about Iran's been a problem for better part of 5 decades.
Right.
This is the opening.
But I submit this country's armed forces has unmatched technology. AI part of that, but unmatched weapons capabilities, reconnaissance capabilities. All you have to do is look at this operation where the American military went into the heart of Iran to recover 2 airmen. Just look at that. No other country would even conceive of attempting such a rescue, much less pull it off. I think the bad guys, the regime in Iran, know, you know what? My predecessors were taken out pretty easily. I could be next. This is not because I believe that they're being more accommodating in their negotiations to protect the 93 million people in the country. It's to protect their own butts because they know, just say the word, you're freaking gone. I really do believe that. They saw what happened to their predecessors, and that was brilliant strategy on our part, but made possible by the unbelievable capability underpinned by modern technology that this country's military has to execute these operations flawlessly. And they know that literally their personal butts are on the chopping block and they could be eliminated, as they say. Now, let's hope this thing lasts and that it sticks. But you did see, we talked about it yesterday, the video of Iranian civilians lining up with the flags around the bridges, around the power plants, being forced at the risk of losing their lives if they don't comply. And they're making examples of innocent people already as this regime. You don't comply. These people are evil, wicked. They don't belong to be on God's green earth, in my view. And so we have ourselves a ceasefire. Cautious. Lawmakers you're getting those that are praising the president. Senator Lindsey Graham, he's more of a hawk for military action perhaps than anybody else in the U.S. Senate. He says that the 10-point proposal put forward by Iran could lead to the withdrawal of American military forces in the region soon. I hope that's the case. I really do. Quote, like everyone, I hope we can end the reign of terror of the Iranian regime through diplomacy. He said that in a social media post, adding, time will tell. But man, Ro Khanna, he's ready to go all full-out impeachment. And what about the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker? That guy is a tool of all time, man. Wow. A handful of lawmakers on the GOP side, they issued a somewhat of a rebuke of the president after he threatened to wipe out a whole civilization. Senator Ron Johnson, he was interviewed on a podcast. He talked about that. But guys, don't you understand that a lot of that is hyperbole designed to get this regime thinking, are we willing to roll the dice here? Because we'd be the first to go. That's what would happen.
It's obvious they never read The Art of the Deal.
Correct. Coming right back. Stay with us.
Hey, this is Bob. Just walk.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
So it's true, we have a 2-week ceasefire. The president calling off any major military operations, not honestly too long prior to the deadline, right, that he had previously announced and made the Iranians aware of. And this idea of him going to social media and I don't remember the exact quote, but eliminating civilization. I understand how that would upset some people. But, man, you got to read between the lines. You knew that that's part of the strategy. That's part of the mind games he was playing. Surely nobody truly thought that he was, as you indicated in the last segment, going to order nuclear bombardment, which is what it would take, let's be honest, to eliminate civilization in Iran. Surely nobody thought that. But they're playing it up for all it's worth.
Elizabeth Warren seemed convinced.
Yeah, and Ro Khanna and J.B. Pritzker and Chris Murphy, I think, the senator.
Which really means one of two things. Either they knowingly stirred up their idiotic base with lies,
yep,
or they themselves are dumb enough to believe their own stupidity.
I guess so, but you know there's another dimension to this is if I can just show how much I hate Donald Trump, I can increase my chances of retaining what is the most important thing in the world to me, and that's my office, right? That's where we are in this country. It's insane. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We have placed too much power, too many trappings, too many spoils in fringe bennies, as we used to call them, in elected office. Why else? Why else? Do you lose your mind? It's so much money spent. And along those lines, I'm going to be an equal opportunist here. What Kristi Noem was doing in that office, that's disgusting. A $70 million private jet. Now the administration has purchased it. You've seen that. She just went out and obtained this thing, and now it's being reported she was running around the country with Corey Lewandowski in the jet while her cross-dressing husband was doing whatever the hell his thing is. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of the way she was living a life of luxury. That's just wrong. That's not what being a public servant is all about. Even a cabinet secretary. So I'm glad the president said, you're out of here. That was terrible, in my view. And now it's being exposed the way she was plundering taxpayer money for her own personal lifestyle. Incredible. It's not what it's supposed to be about. Not whatsoever. So, also Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, he all but declared military victory this morning in his remarks. In fact, he actually used the words decisive military victory. This is after the president agreed to a 2-week truce. He made this statement during a press conference at the Pentagon. He told reporters that, hey, the War Department has succeeded in decimating Iran's military capabilities. And again, even though I know it's being said, especially by the president's detractors, what are the goals here? He actually did outline, I've talked about them on the show, I want to make sure I get this right, 5 objectives. Help me out here. One was to eliminate their nuclear capability as well as eliminate their ability to reconstitute nuclear weapons, right? Eliminate their ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile capability, and they also had some medium range. We figured that out, that these guys got missiles that could actually get to Munich, for example, in Germany, a member of NATO. That would drag us into a war, ostensibly, should they launch on a NATO nation. It was to decimate their Navy and Air Force, specifically said Navy and Air Force. I don't know about their Army, their infantry, their ground troops. I don't know if they have any. But, of course, if you got no Navy and Air Force, your ground troops are pretty worthless at that point in a modern war, right? Traditional, conventional weapons war. It was to, and one of those, by the way, is to destroy their ability to reconstitute. That was actually an objective in addition to destroying the existing store of nuclear weapons or wherever they were in that point, as well as their intercontinental ballistic missiles. In other words, you not only don't have any more missiles to fire, you don't have the ability to reproduce any. So we're going after the production facilities, which is what we did. And then, of course, to ensure that the neighboring nations that are our allies are secure. He made that clear. Did I leave anything out? I think that covers the 5. That was articulated. So that sounds
been articulated multiple times.
Pretty specifically, explicitly, just as I did there.
But the willfully ignorant will never accept it because they're deranged.
Well, I find those to be reasonable objectives. When you talk about military objectives, you can measure, hey, do they have naval and air capabilities? You can measure that, can't you? You can certainly identify all the production facilities. We have incredible intelligence, once again, driven by our super powerful technology of where they make these bombs and missiles. Those have been eliminated. And then, of course, their nuclear capability. Now, it has surfaced, is it not, Rhino, in the last 24 hours or so, that there's a significant store of uranium inside the nation, and now we're trying to figure out how to transport that out, how to relocate that in a safe way. But that seems like a reasonable objective here when you're talking about a regime that would like nothing more than to produce a nuclear warhead that could travel on an ICBM and take out Europe and then come for this country. It's pretty clear that's what they want to do. They've not minced any words about that. How could you mistake that?
Well, they've just recently started mincing words. They're trying to retcon the meaning of death to America.
Well, I was about to say that. How can you not conclude that that's the objective when for decades their streets have been filled with nutcases that say death to America? Hell, we have them right here in this country doing it, which is more disgusting. And you know, in this country, we respect and allow free speech. That's what makes it different. You do that in that country, off with your head. You say something such as death to Iran in the streets of Iran, what happens to an Iranian individual, a citizen of Iran? What happens to them if they come out with such a chant? You're done. Hadn't we seen that in communist nations? And can't you also equate their style of running a country, their values, if you could call them that? Well, they're right out of the Marxist communist playbook. We can't have anybody that's against us here, right? You got to go. Can't have that. Can't have any people that might think freely on their own accord and express their thoughts. And the Democrats in this country, as far as I can tell, they actually deem certain free speech in this country as violence. But yet true violence, oh, that's free expression. They try to excuse it, justify it, rationalize it. And you just got to sit down and take it. Is that true? It's totally true.
Why else would they keep letting people out?
That's 100% right.
You get arrested for a violent crime. Oh, well, it must have been your socioeconomic factors.
Always blaming
On your way.
somebody else. No doubt. I know I brought this up before. I got to do it again. I'll never forget this because I think it epitomizes, and it's such a strong visual reflection of how they think. And it's one of the BLM people during the George Floyd incident and the freaking riots across the country. You remember we played it on the show. And she said, oh, yeah, if they're going in there and looting and stealing Gucci purses, they were right in front of the Gucci store somewhere. Remember that? Oh, that's fine. That's reparations. What? You're justifying theft. That's how they think. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But that's literally, when you get to the point where you start justifying harming another person's person or taking their property and you rationalize that, you're sick, man. You really are. So we have Democrats in this country, activists in particular, that are taking a page out of the book of these radical regimes in other countries that produce nothing but misery, honestly, is what they produce. Oh, we want equality. Yeah, equal misery. That's what you're good at. We got Seth Keshel, author of The American War on Election Corruption, coming up next. Stay with us.
Here comes the thunder.
From SuperTalk.fm.
Ready here.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome now Seth Keshel, author, The American War on Election Corruption. Hey, Seth, thanks for coming on.
Well, good morning out here to you guys, and thank you for having me back in.
Yeah, you bet. So tell us about this event you got coming up.
Well, I'm coming back to my old stomping grounds. I'm an Ole Miss graduate from 2008. I did the 5-year plan at Ole Miss. Of course, you know, nobody's ever lost a party at Ole Miss. I took my time getting through, and I was part of the baseball program there, but also part of Army ROTC. And once I got done with Army ROTC, I went off onto a brief 6-year career in the Army. And I think I've only been back to Oxford maybe twice. Yeah, 3 times actually since I graduated from Ole Miss. But everybody tells me about how much Oxford has changed. I'm not so sure that that's a great thing based on what I remember. But I am partnering up with Lori Syree and Mississippi Fair Elections to talk about my new book, The American War on Election Corruption, and also to meet with local grassroots activists there in North Mississippi.
So what was the catalyst? What prompted you to get so deeply involved in this particular subject, election corruption, to the point where you wrote a book about it?
Well, I got pulled into the battle for election integrity in the waning days of the 2020 election. I was somebody who engaged in political analysis just as a hobby. I was marginally involved with a few grassroots efforts. But when the 2020 election blew up like it did, I had a whole set of proprietary models and data that pointed to very pinpointed locations where election corruption was rampant in 2020. And I've been able to amass tons of research nobody else can match that has been very useful to advancing the goals of transparent elections. So General Flynn pulled me into the fight. In the closing days of the 2020 election, I was part of the teams that were challenging the cases that were eventually thrown out of court. And in the 2021 run up to the real election integrity movement, my data became very widespread, very easy to understand, and very handy for passing off to people that need to understand the magnitude of what we're dealing with. And ever since then, I've been off to the races, traveled all over the country talking about this topic. And in 2025, Larry Schweikert, the author of The Patriot's History to the United States, recommended to his publisher that they talk about a book with me. And that materialized literally out of thin air. I had 90 days to turn around a 70,000 word manuscript. And what we have now is, I believe, the preeminent work on election corruption in the Trump era. 7,000 plus copies sold in just 5 weeks.
Wow, that's incredible. So are you seeing any interest from anybody that could address this and do something about it? As you are well aware, for the most part, our elections are administered and controlled, including the policies and the standards and the processes and the procedures at the state level. Some of that, of course, emanates from the federal level, but for the most part, that power is granted to the states to determine the place and time of elections and the methodology they use.
Well, people are listening. Most of the Republican Party leadership is on board with what my book would call for transparent, common sense election reforms. Maybe not to the degree that I would call for them to happen, but of course, small bites at the apple is another way of going about this. But look, we have a big problem with the states interpreting the elections clause as their ability to make any and every law possible to disenfranchise other states.
Okay.
So funny enough, Mississippi is at the center of an important Supreme Court battle. Mississippi Secretary of State against the RNC over late arriving mail-in ballots. Mississippi doesn't really have a mail-in ballot crisis. This is something found in the margins that I think is going to lead to good reforms nationwide. But you have states like Washington, Oregon, and California that have automatic voter registration, universal mail-in voting, and legalized ballot harvesting. And of course, those states all together, they make up more than 70 electoral votes. So they can blank out Republican margins in Texas and Florida just by running corrupt elections. So the case in 2020, the best case that was filed was Ken Paxton's case, Texas versus Pennsylvania. And I wrote about it in the book. And Paxton's case argued that the misconduct of the elections, the miscarriage of election laws in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin disenfranchised what was then 38 electors from Texas. And 20 other Republican states signed onto it. And the Supreme Court, even though they owed it to the American people to hear out this issue because 40% of the people didn't trust the results even in 2020, they threw it out. So, they owed it to us to fix that. And of course, we're still here in a country that more than 60% of the people don't trust our elections.
Yeah, and it's particularly important, is it not, Seth, in the so-called swing states? I know there are, some 10 states that conduct their elections virtually all by mail-in. And it's the problem there, as I see it and as I believe, is that we have these voter rolls, and they just send ballots out to everybody that's listed in the voter rolls, whether they're still currently eligible to vote or not. And these ballots just end up out there in the public, for a better way to, in the universe, for a better way to describe it. And that just seems like that dramatically increases the risk of some sort of tomfoolery going on.
Well, it's definitely not just tomfoolery or shenanigans, as some people call it. It's outright corruption. So the states that you're referring to, you're actually talking about 8 states that have universal mail-in voting,
okay,
which voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, by the way. Trump only won Nevada and Utah among those states in 2024.
Yep.
But when we expand it to my group of states that I believe have excessive mail-in voting, I get at least 12 states. And in some of those other states, we do have automatic mail lists, like in Maricopa County, Arizona, Pima County, Arizona. And what happens is the rolls are flooded with ineligible entries or duplicated or triplicated entries. Mail-in ballots go out to every name or registration on the roll, regardless of whether it's one person or a living person. And then you have weeks of an early voting window to go collect these ballots using data. So it's very easy. It's very easy to stipulate what kind of ballot count you need and fill that quota when you have, in the case of Pennsylvania, you have 7 weeks to collect the ballots, and most of the Republicans are going to vote on Election Day.
Yeah, and of course, Maricopa County, arguably the most pivotal when it comes to presidential elections of any in the country. Maricopa, of course, where Phoenix is located in Arizona, it's become maybe one of the quintessential swing states. And the other thing that's unique, as I recall, about Arizona is they don't allow the state to start, or any counties in the state to begin tabulating mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, until the polls close. And that's why it always seems to take 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, we have an issue in Arizona with the late earlies. These are the people that get a mail-in ballot, but then because they don't trust the mail-in voting system, they walk it into the polls on Election Day. They go in a separate pile. And I think it's more of an excuse than anything to sample what kind of vote is going on. But Maricopa County is over 60% of the vote. And then when you combine it with Pima County, which is where I live, this is Tucson, you have the two counties make up 3/4 or more of the vote. So you have two counties able to blot out 13 overwhelmingly Republican counties as a whole. So I do consider Maricopa County the symbolic ground zero of the election crisis because of the way Arizona was called by Fox News on November 3rd, 2020.
Yeah, it sure seems like it's kind of some odd stuff going on there. And then Georgia is also cropped up, is it not? As maybe having some anomalies in their elections.
Well, I've got an entire chapter dedicated to Georgia in the book under registration as the foundation. Georgia put in automatic voter registration in October of 2016. Not enough time to spin up enough registrations to flip the state to Clinton against Trump. Trump won by over 5 points with no real campaign in Georgia. Yeah. And then all of a sudden in 2020, Trump has one of the highest Republican vote gains on record in Georgia, only to lose the state in a presidential election for the first time since 1992. The difference was there were 4 years to spin up new registrations, especially in the metro Atlanta area, which had more than double the amount of net new registrations in the 8 key counties than they had in the Obama surge in 2008, which was a legitimate black voter surge in metro Atlanta. And then, of course, you have the issue with Brad Raffensperger going on the press the next day after the election and then saying there's 100,000 votes left, the result won't change, Trump is going to win the state even by a smaller margin. And then they counted 300,000 more ballots. I think there was a call put in because Trump had already won North Carolina that it was essential that Georgia go to Biden. And there you have 3 more days of counting in Fulton and DeKalb counties. And then Georgia served as the ultimate buffer between Trump's starting point on the floor to Pennsylvania potentially being the decisive electoral votes.
I got you. So you're traveling to Ole Miss here pretty soon to discuss all this, right? You've got an event coming up.
Yeah, we piggybacked this because I was planning to come to Oxford for the LSU Ole Miss baseball game on Saturday. It's the 20-year anniversary celebration of the SEC tournament champions. Yep. I was part of that program, not as a player, but as a stats guy. I've written about my experience with Ole Miss baseball in the book extensively. And I reached out to Lori Cyree, let her know I was coming in, as she put together this event. So it's open to the public and it's free, and it's a good time to be able to get together and talk about some important stuff.
So in your opinion, having done all this research and analysis of elections, sounds like across the country and all the various approaches and methodologies and concerns, what do we need to do? What's your recommendation? You got about a minute.
Well, the good news, Mississippi is, relative to other states, in a much stronger position to have good elections. But the most important thing is that we clean out voter rolls, dump voter rolls, make sure that only eligible voters are listed. Then we need to put some real controls on the mail-in balloting process, preferably get it back to straight-up absentees. And then we have a number of transparency measures which are critical to the public trust, like how we report votes, nobody reporting late votes, no big cities coming in to wash out entire states.
Yeah, all good stuff. Certainly eliminating this practice that's in 8 states of just sending a ballot out to everybody that's listed in the voter rolls. That just seems like that opens the door big time to me. But we appreciate it, Seth.
It's obvious to people that have good intentions on elections.
I get it. Seth Keshel, author of The American War on Election Corruption. Appreciate you joining us, Seth. Good luck with the book and the event. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
You too. Coming right back in the Element.
During the spring track.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Don't know if you guys caught it, but after the first segment, Rhino was right on top of things based on our discussion of the regime in Iran having second thoughts about continuing to fight the Americans and the Israelis and coming to the table, according to what the president reported last night. And thus the president called off what could have been a bad situation. I think they were going to take out those leaders personally, but Rhino right on top of it with Rock the Casbah. That's perfect. The video was awesome as well. The king called up his jet fighters. That's my favorite. With the synthesizer in the background, sort of emulating the takeoff of a jet fighter. He said, "You better earn your pay. Drop your bombs between the minarets down the Casbah way." Great lyrics there. Appreciate that. Hey, the Bulls firmly in charge of the markets today. The Dow plowing ahead, now up 1,200 points. That's because oil has fallen even a tad more since we started the program, down $18 a barrel. Do you ever remember in us tracking this, Rhino, seeing such big swings one way or another in the price of a barrel of oil on a given day? I mean, normally it's $1, $2, $3 is a big swing one way or another. 18 in one day? That's a lot. So down to $95. And that's still a little high for comfort. If you're wanting to get back to the sub $3 gas, we're going to have to get the price down in the 60s, high 50s, low 60s to achieve that. But right now, that certainly looks a lot better than when it's got that one representing the 100 handle in front of it, whatever the number is. So got to be pleased. Markets like it. Man, I'm hoping. I'm praying.
Yeah, you got to go back to the 2020 sell-off to get that big of a drop. And then before that, you got to go back to 91.
Oh, okay. In 08, we didn't have anything quite that significant in 08? Okay. Interesting.
And the one in 91 was the drop-off after Desert Storm.
Yeah. Makes sense. Elections held yesterday across the country in Georgia and Wisconsin. A Republican, no surprise here, won the special election to replace Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, of course, resigned last year and said, "That's it for me." And so this person will have a short-lived term until the November midterm elections, have to run all over again. But it was Republican Clay Fuller who prevailed to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene. However, it should be noted that the margin there represents a huge shift. This is a district that the president took 68% of the vote of in 2024. It swung 25 points away from that. 25 points. So this is something that Republicans should heed and certainly pay attention to. Good that her seat remained in Republican hands. Desperately needed, by the way, in the House because that seat's been open, and that's a vote. So that extends the margin, which is razor thin for the Republicans in the United States House by one. And then 2 Wisconsin Supreme Court elections. Just incredible. Again, back to our discussion earlier in the show about the amount of money pouring into political campaigns. $100 million for a state Supreme Court race? That is hard to fathom. Hard to fathom. The liberal candidate won by a lot in that state. So this gives the liberals more power in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. I think we should take a look at that and take heed of that, potentially as an indicator of the national scene, the national landscape for the midterm elections right around the corner, 7 months away. Man, just incredible the amount of money. Remember, Elon Musk contributed a bunch, and the president came in as well in the election last fall. Didn't win, though. So this time, I think the Republicans said, yeah, we're not going to spend a lot of money on this. Doesn't look good for winning this Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. So that's the update on the election scene in Wisconsin and Georgia. Two key elections that certainly both parties are paying close attention to try to be informed as to what can be expected in the upcoming midterms. We are taking a break right here. Charlie Drape, Jackson beat reporter for the Clarion Ledger, joins Middays in the Element Wealth studio after Fox News and SuperTalk News. Please stay with us. Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. We are live from the Element Wealth studio on this
Hump Day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Charlie Drape, Jackson, a beat reporter for the Clarion Ledger. Charlie, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
So you've been tracking this situation with the water. I mean, it seems like that when you think about the city of Jackson, you think about all the various problems that affect the city of Jackson. You got to put the water top of that list. It's gotten a lot of attention nationally as well as locally and across the state. Yep. And it seems like that problem persists, honestly, that there really isn't just a full resolution to those situations that have occurred. But you've been doing some investigation on this, haven't you?
Yeah. It's, the water is pretty nonstop in Jackson, I'd say. We actually, the Clarion Ledger, we tested the water just like we did after the water crisis.
So tell me how that came out. So the paper decided we're going to go test the water.
Yeah, so after the water crisis in 2022, the state and the city, said, hey, the water's okay. And for accountability reasons, we were like, well, let's test it and make sure it's okay. And so we did that in 2022, and 4 years later, we decided to do it again. A lot has changed. The city doesn't have the water system anymore. There's a third-party utility, the court's over it, Jackson Water, JXN Water, and there's an interim third-party manager, Ted Hennepin, who's in charge and leading repairs for the last 4 years. So we just said, hey, why not? Let's test it again and see if it's still, safe.
Yeah. So, but you're in the media business. You don't know anything about testing water. So how'd you figure out how to do that?
Yeah, no. So just like we did in 2022, there's a lab actually out in Ridgeland called Waypoint Analytical.
Okay. And
we worked with them in 2022, and we basically called them up again and said, hey, we want to do this all over again, and they supplied us with kind of the samples that you need, gave us a procedure that we followed pretty strictly, and we went up there. I actually drove up there with one of our really talented photojournalists, Ayrton Breckenridge, and it's right across County Line Road, so we just picked up the samples and basically started in North Jackson and worked our way down and went to 16 different locations around the city, kind of a mixture of homes, restaurants, and businesses, and just followed the protocol. They had these little kind of sample bottles. We just filled it up to the line, attached it, put it on ice in a cooler, and then drove it back up to Waypoint Analytical, turned it in, and they sent it up to their Memphis lab, actually, which is certified for drinking water and testing drinking water in Mississippi. And they sent it on, did the testing for us. It took about 2 weeks for us to get the results back, and then, they got the results.
All right, so what did you find from these results in 22 and then the most recent test?
Yeah, so the three kind of things we tested for, which are kind of key indicators that if they're not in the water, that the water is safe, is E. coli, coliform bacteria, and lead. So we had you can test for E. coli and coliform like as the same, and then we had another 16 bottles for lead. So what we found basically is in all 16 samples there was no E. coli present, which is a good thing, right?
Okay.
There was one site in West Jackson on Smith Robinson Street that tested positive for coliform bacteria. Which is kind of E. coli is kind of a type of coliform bacteria. And when we presented that to Jackson Water, they said you should go retest that site immediately because it could be a false positive. It could be, a contamination from the lab. I mean, you could have coliform bacteria in your hands, is what they told us.
Okay.
So we went back and we tested it immediately, and it came back as negative. So I don't think there's anything to worry about there. And then as far as lead, there were actually, out of the 16 locations, 4 sites that had traceable amounts of lead in it. 3 of them were in South Jackson, and 1 of them was in Fondren. And but the key part is that the EPA has what they call an action level, like a threshold, and the action level for the EPA is 15 parts per billion. Mm-hmm. And all of our samples, the 4 that came back, the highest one was 5. Okay. So it's well below the federal action level where, if it's 15 or above, water utilities have to, shut the whole thing down and figure out how we're going to get this lead out of the system.
So this all sounds like good news.
Yeah, I would say for sure it's a positive story, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were there just some theories that people had or presumptions people had that the water is got contaminants in it that are unsafe for consumption?
Well, I don't know about that. I think it's more of just, the water crisis did a lot of damage and trauma, and even before the water crisis,
just the confidence level overall was down.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jackson has had its troubles with the water system for decades. If I'm not mistaken, you're from Jackson, right? So I think people living here, just with all the stuff that's happened over the years, they have a little bit of trauma. I guess maybe that's too big. Tough of a word, but a little bit of a trauma of the water system. But as far as our results go and talking to Jackson Water, there's really not a whole lot to worry about. But it is interesting. We went to these sites that found lead in their samples, and we went and told them, said, hey, you tested positive for some trace elements of lead. Yeah. And pretty much every single one of them was like, okay, well, I don't drink the water anyway. So I think, that while it is a positive, I think it is kind of a positive story, I definitely think there's that element of, people not fully trusting.
There's skepticism.
Yeah,
Big
exactly.
Time. Yeah. I get it. And because it's been a problem, as you indicated, for a long time. And in particular, the crisis back in the 22 time frame that really brought it to a head, brought Ted Hennepin in and third parties coming in, taking over. And then there's the problem with the back office as well, and the inability for the water department to properly bill and collect.
Yeah.
And that's a huge. You just hear stories about that all the time.
No.
Maybe that's another story you could do an investigation.
Oh, trust me, I've talked to plenty of residents, and I think that's probably the main story right now. Where repairs, I think water coming out of your faucet is substantially better than it was in 2022 throughout the city. Okay. But the big part that I think Jackson Water is dealing with right now is the billing. Yeah. Because you hear these stories of people that have, like a $20,000 water bill.
Nothing for 2 years and boom, here's $20,000.
Exactly, yeah.
Stuff
so
like that.
It's definitely, I think, the main challenge that Jackson Water is facing.
What do you think about this new water authority, which was enacted by our legislature this past session?
Yeah, I mean, look, the court has the water system right now, and part of the stipulated order with the court is that there needs to be some sort of transition plan for it to leave the court and, maybe go back to this water authority board, maybe go back to the city. And I think, right now this proposed water authority board is just one option because, at the end of the day, Jackson Water is still in charge, and it's really up to Judge Wingate to decide who's going to...
9-member board, as you know.
Yeah, 9-member board. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. So,
appointees from the mayor, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and neighboring cities.
Yeah, so it'll be 3 members appointed by Jackson mayor and confirmed by the Jackson City Council, 1 member appointed by the Ridgeland mayor and confirmed by their board of aldermen, 1 member appointed by the Byram mayor, confirmed by their board of aldermen, 2 members appointed by the governor, 1 member appointed by the lieutenant governor, and 1 member appointed by the governor in consultation with Jackson's mayor, which it is a bit of a switch up, though, from what was originally proposed, because, Jackson's big thing is that they want a majority control of the board because it's, they pay for 90% of the asset, right?
The mayor expressed that concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And, but so what the original board was, and they actually had a public hearing, maybe like 2 months ago now, to get kind of public feedback. And the original board got a lot of, positivity, I'd say, because in that version, Jackson had a majority members on the board. They had 4 members appointed by the Jackson mayor, 2 by the governor, 1 by the lieutenant governor. The mayor of Jackson would have been on the board, and then the president of the Jackson Chamber of Commerce would also be on the board.
Okay. Interesting.
But, things obviously changed like they do in the legislature, and I'm not sure if Governor Reeves has signed that bill into law yet, but
I think it's still waiting for his signature.
I think even if
run out of time, though.
Yeah, I think even if it doesn't, if he doesn't sign it, it'll still go into law.
That's right. You'd have to veto it otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
we got about 10 seconds. What else you working on investigative-wise, real quick?
Oh, well, we're just covering. I was just covered a Jackson City Council meeting. Covering the new police chief. That's all that good stuff. So
Charlie Drape,
go
Jackson beat reporter, Clarion Ledger. Thanks for coming on, Charlie.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth studio.
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge. Huge news.
Huge news.
Huge.
You need to listen to this.
MidDays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. You can read more about this situation with the Jackson's Water at SuperTalk.fm. Charlie Drape from the Mississippi Clarion Ledger, as we discussed in the last segment, authored an article that you can find on our website, supertalk.fm. Years after water crisis, new tests show where Jackson's water stands. So appreciate Charlie coming in, and I think, Rhino, we can tell the folks that you can expect to see more investigative type work and content on our website, on our programs, with this partnership with Clarion Ledger, and talking about certainly with the city council and some other things going on in Jackson. And as we've said before, I certainly believe that we need our capital city to succeed. We need it to thrive. It does indirectly affect all of us. Of course, if you live in the capital city or even around it, it has a direct impact on you. And I would submit that since the Capitol Complex Improvement District was expanded and now a larger area of the city is jointly patrolled, including by Capitol Police, state troopers are assigned to Capitol Police, City of Jackson, Sheriff's Department, so forth. I don't know. I feel safer, honestly. You see their presence all over the place. And I think you'd have to agree, Rhino, that just those vehicles with the blue lights flashing just parked around the area, that's a pretty powerful deterrent against bad guys doing bad stuff. So I support that. I think that was a good move on the part of our legislature. As you recall, the administration under Mayor Lumbumba, they very strongly opposed such a move. They didn't want the state to intervene more, but this was wholly necessary, and it's kind of the same situation we have with the president wanting to deploy National Guard into cities that are awash in crime, Memphis being one of them. You've heard reports from folks in Memphis that said, yeah, things are a lot better now. Washington, D.C., another one. Things are much better. Again, it's just the visual effect of having law enforcement detectable in your sight. That is a powerful deterrent to crime, I believe. So I think that was a good move. Just wanted to get that out there. But check that article out. It's pretty good stuff. No doubt about it. So we've been talking this morning about this suspension by the president of attacking Iran. However, so far, Iran has not reciprocated, right? They launched some post-suspension attacks on Kuwait and Israel, if I've got that right. It seems to have tapered off. Not seeing that now.
Yeah, that's a problem with their defense doctrine. I think they call it the Mosaic defense doctrine. That was basically put in place in the last 2 decades, I think. Maybe even earlier than that. But its foundational principle is you decentralize the command structure in the event of a decapitation strike like they saw with the death of the Ayatollah, or any of their senior command are taken out. Then the command structure falls on the provincial commander. There's 31 provinces that are all pretty much independent.
Right.
And working on their own, with their own militia, with their own missiles, with their own everything. And that's the way they break it down.
Okay.
So the negotiations are taking part, as far as I understand, with the 3rd or 4th different Ayatollah since the beginning of the war. But they are the acting supreme leader, and that's part of one of the translations that came out of their statement last night was regarding technical, I don't think they said difficulties, but they acknowledged it will take some time to rein everything in.
Okay. Well, so it doesn't appear that it was just intentional ignorance.
I mean, it was intentional, but it was intentional from the standpoint of there was no central command telling them to do that. It was on their own volition.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably the better way to describe it. There wasn't direct order action after the ceasefire was announced to, hey, just disregard that, ignore that, and proceed with launching these attacks. That's not what happened, is what your description of it there. Appreciate that. The Democrats are turning to tax cuts ahead of the midterms. But let's be clear, tax cuts for some people, other people, we got to get more of your money. And I ran across, this is crazy, an article published in the New York Times in 1909. So what the Democrats want to do, just so you'll know, there are some members of the Senate and the House that have put together legislation that would remove even more people off the tax rolls. And even though last year slightly less than half the households in this country paid 0 federal income taxes, the Democrats' goal is to get that to where it's about the top 1 to 5% pay 100% of the income taxes. That's what they want. Now, as it stands right now, this is official data from the IRS, by the way. The top half of taxpayers shoulder 97.7%. It's incredible of the total amount of federal personal income tax revenue collected by the Treasury. And the bottom 50% account for 2.3%. Top 50%, 97 and change. Bottom 50%, 2% and change. But they say that's not fair. I agree. That doesn't sound fair, but not in the way that they define it. But the New York Times, so what they're leaning into now, you've seen this, is they want to tax your wealth. Not your income, which our Constitution allows, regrettably, sadly, but they want to tax your wealth. But there are bills that would increase or institute a threshold under which there would be no federal income taxes due. One of them even up to $92,000. You make in your household $92,000 and less, you got no federal income taxes. As an individual, $46,000, half of that or less, no federal income taxes. And now they're starting to compete with each other, are the Democrats, on how high they can get that threshold up. But so they're turning to plans, not only at the federal level, but the state level, to tax wealth. That's not taxes. That's confiscation. The New York Times, the editorial board, this is incredible. In 1909, they warned against a federal income tax. Because remember, that came about when, Rhino? 1913, as I recall. Or maybe I got the date wrong. Is it the 13th Amendment is where I'm getting the number 13? It was sometime in that time frame, right, that we instituted federal income tax.
Yeah, 16th Amendment.
16th Amendment. Okay. So 1913, 16th Amendment. Is that right? Did I have that right?
Yes.
The number's right? Okay. So the New York Times warned against this in 1909. Quote from the New York Times. Can you imagine seeing this in the New York Times today? Here we go. When men once get the habit of helping themselves to the property of others, they are not easily cured of it. Hell, that's what they campaign on now. The New York Times salivates over that kind of rhetoric today, do they not?
Yeah, the history of the income tax goes back to the Civil War, where it was levied to fund the war and then repealed in the 1870s. Then they tried to do it again during the Gilded Age in the 1890s. It was declared unconstitutional. Then you had the 16th Amendment that was ratified in 1913, and it was supposed to only be on the top 6% of earners.
That's right, yeah.
The top 1% were the ones that actually wound up paying anything, and it's just gotten worse from there.
Completely worse. I'm just shocked at this eloquent statement here that's so true. When men once get the habit of helping themselves to the property of others. You mean stealing? They are not easily cured of it. Imagine that. That's where we are today, coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the sea, Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
So we're talking about the New York Times in their 1909 article where they were warning against the income tax. Incredible. I just had no idea what a change there has been in attitude and philosophy, in policy positions at, as the president calls it, the failing New York Times. Now, look, I'll be perfectly honest. It's good journalism. Do I agree with the editorial board? Rarely. But the journalists are pretty good. I mean, they're in terms of just creating content. They're pretty dang good. I give that to them. They should be. They've been at it a long time. Nation's largest newspaper, city newspaper. I don't know if it still is, but was for many decades. The Gray Lady, as it was referred to, hired the best journalist in the country. But, man, they've just gone all in on liberalism. I can't deal with it. So they just published an article. Think about the contrast between the one we just referenced, where they were warning against imposing an income tax. Here's one from last week. It's good to be a billionaire, even at tax time. Paying taxes would feel better if the truly rich were bearing a fair share. These people are terrible at math, awful at math. Not only, you just have to be honest about it, are the rich driving the economy through their consumption? They also shoulder, by far, an outsized amount of the income taxes in this country. But, of course, they always use the same deceptive Joe Biden tactics in calculating an effective tax rate that assumes that their assets and the gain on their assets would be taxed even if there was not a disposition of those assets that would trigger a tax liability. Just the fact that on paper it went up, you should have to pay taxes on that. Whether you actually sold any of it and recognized any gain from a transaction involving the asset or not, you just need to pay more. It's just incredible. The income tax is for working people. So is the payroll tax, they say, which wage earners and their employers pay into Social Security and Medicare week after week. The payroll tax and the income tax corral nearly everybody who holds down a job. That's right. Do they not realize that you're paying in? And I know that this is a kind of a convoluted concept to grasp, but you're not paying in for your benefits. You're paying in to cover the outflows of benefits to those who are presently enjoying Social Security and Medicare. You're really paying in for the right to draw benefits when you get to that point. It's kind of like a club. You're paying in to be a member of the club, you're paying your dues, and then you get ready to retire and you draw benefits. There's not an account with your name on it for Social Security and Medicare. You know, I've been through this a million times. Most people think there is. Now, when they send you a letter and say, hey, by the way, this is what the benefits you could receive are, it's not like because that money's tucked away somewhere with your name on it. It's just the way the calculation has determined the amount of your benefits. So there's a professor, Ray Madoff. He's an expert on taxes at Boston College Law School. Oh, he's an expert on taxes, and he's at a law school. You know he's an authority, right? He says much of their staggering wealth, which includes cash, stock, bonds, gold, art collections, homes, yachts, and everything else of value they have accumulated, it's barely taxed. Right. So, what's your problem there, Professor? He says...
all those assets he listed were taxed at purchase.
Correct. And the income they generated to purchase those assets was taxed. Now, is it true that they're able to borrow money, pledging their assets against it for cash, disposable income? Yeah, it is. But how do they get the assets to start with? That seems to be lost in that conversation. He's written a book, The Second Estate, How the Tax Code Made an American Aristocracy. Are you serious? The professor says that billionaires in the United States can be virtually exempt from taxes like the French aristocracy before the 1789 revolution. Oh, my gosh. And they're all mad. This is something that the Democrats complain about because even if they earn wages subject to the payroll taxes, Social Security and Medicare, it is true. Those cap out this year at $184.5. But they failed to share with you and include in that discussion their benefits also cap out. What they're saying is we want to get rid of the cap so these people can continue to pay in to those programs, but we're not going to give them any more out. In other words, we want them to pay for everybody else's benefits. Well, then it becomes a wealth redistribution program. It's almost like that now to some extent. Goes on to say the tax code has helped create a new hereditary class, taking advantage of arcane rules that people can't understand. Oh, my gosh. This is just so crazy and ignores reality that, you know what happened here, Professor, is people like you used all of the creations of these people because what they did was deemed by a large number of people as valuable, and they exchanged their assets for the privilege of using or receiving benefit from those assets, and that's what made them rich. It's a pretty good system. It actually works pretty good.
And he might have a leg to stand on if Jensen Huang was selling NVIDIA chips out of the trunk of his car.
Agree.
But there's a whole bunch of people under him that make a pretty good living because they work for him.
In fact, last I checked, 75% of his employees, millionaires. Half of those, over $20 million, right? It's not like the picture they paint, which is these are just greedy CEO founders and they don't share the wealth. You think Jensen shared it? 75% of his team, millionaires. It's pretty good. That's why people are dying to go to work to that place. They know that they can not only earn a salary, but can participate in the upside of the company as well. All good companies are like that. This is where they're so wrong about this stuff. It becomes necessary to compete for talent in the open market. The big question is, well, what do you propose alternatively? And they never think about, well, yeah, you could come up with all these wealth taxes and stuff, but you would essentially be putting a governor on innovation and opportunity in economic growth. And like I've said before, that's easy to do once you've created the pie. Just recut it. But these people that he wants to go after, they're thinking about how to make that pie bigger that generates opportunity for a lot of people. And, I read a report last week. I said on the program before, I thought within the next 3 years, we'd see the first single-person company, single-employee company ever that generated $1 billion of sales. And I read a report on someone that's knocking on the door on that right now. Someone in their 20s that came up. I can't remember what the actual product/service technology was that they've invented, but they're getting close to that. This is a miracle of the innovation that free enterprise with less than European-style, Democrat, socialist-style, draconian, onerous taxes would allow to be produced. They just don't seem to get that. And
to the point that in several European countries, there's negative incentive to do a good job for the thing that's actually paying your bills because you're taxed so highly.
Yeah, no incentive, no drive, no enthusiasm to overachieve.
To the point that manual labor jobs like electricians, construction, any of that have to be heavily subsidized because nobody can afford to use them.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point. Have to be subsidized. That's right. Unbelievable. And I'll say it again. They don't produce squat in those other countries. You can't name any big-time innovation that's come out of there. Coming right back with the final segment of hour 2 of Middays and then another hour. Stay with us.
Polyumpa, Mississippi.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on the C Spire text line. Get to some text here for you now. That's 601-879-4395. And by the way, go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income, growth, and guarantees. The NASDAQ comfortably in the green, up 688 points right now. The Dow, it is ticked upward as well at this moment, up 1,213 points. All the indexes are in the green. Hadn't seen the funny money today, Rhino. How's it doing?
I hadn't even checked it.
Crude oil down $18.48. That is highly unusual. And the volatility index, that's what's got the markets under the control of the bulls. It's down 5.8 points. It's been trending upward. Because there's a lot of volatility with this war situation and some other economic factors at play.
Yeah, funny money's up about 3%, up to 71.5 today.
It just came across. Yep, you're right. So good for the funny money, folks. On the C Spire text line, Iran was never a threat. It's sad how people will believe whatever this man says. Remember, he told y'all that he took out their capabilities last year and it would take years to rebuild. It's really sickening. Well, it's true that Operation Midnight Hammer was thought to have destroyed their nuclear capabilities. All I can say is that new intelligence surfaced, according to what's been communicated by the administration, that indicated they were much closer than thought to obtaining a nuclear weapon. And they also had ballistic missile capability, and the combination of that literally is deadly. You stick one of those warheads on a medium-range ballistic missile, I do not put it past them whatsoever to launch a nuclear attack within that range, which would mean Western Europe. And that is disturbing. So I have no reason at this point to disbelieve or refuse to believe the information coming from the administration. If it's later determined that that was false and not grounded in fact, was not the empirical evidence did not exist to prove the existence, I'll certainly adjust my thoughts on the matter. But right now, if it's true, and I have no reason, like I said, to not believe what was communicated, that they were inching ever so close.
But that's the difference between sanity and this texter.
I see.
You could never provide any evidence to this texter that would refute their derangement.
Looking back through their history, I would have a tendency to agree with you. Also on the 662, so y'all are in support of this war, maybe the only people I know of that are. It's not a matter of, in my view, and I don't want to speak for Rhino here, it's not a matter of being in support of the war. I'm in support of appropriate action based on information gleaned through our various intelligence resources that this action was necessary to prevent something really bad from happening, and more importantly, as I've said before, to rid the world of this continuous menace now for nearly 50 years And at this point, it feels like that action was totally justified and was also very surgical and very precise. And if on the other side of this, what we end up with is an Iran without nuclear capability, or more importantly, reconstitution of nuclear ambitions, and without an Air Force, without a Navy that's under the control of radical nuts, and also cannot produce or launch ICBMs, I would say this would be worth it, in my view. I think that prevents, avoids, deters, and mitigates lots of future problems that have been problems for a long time. I've also been clear that I believe what made this possible, with the precision and accuracy and skill that it has been executed, is incredible technology that we have that is embedded in all of our military operations. And that's a large swath of technology, and that has advanced significantly just in the last 5 years. And I think it showed the world. Also, I believe it sent a very powerful message to our most ardent enemies in Russia and China that do have more resources to go to war with us. I think it's given them some food for thought here. I really think they're observing what's going on and realizing, yeah, we don't want to take these guys on. I mean, there's a lot of value to that, you'd have to admit. They're the big loser here, in my view. Well, it's time for a break here on Middays. It's top of the hour, coming right back in the Element Well studio with the afternoon portion of Middays.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays from the Element Well studio on this
Hump Day.
The Sports Talk gang, they're going to be live at Scruggs Farm Lawn and Garden in Saltillo today for their Drive Green Spring Sales event. Check out their green savings on John Deere zero-turn mowers with 0% for 36 months. Gators with 1.9% for 39 months. Compact tractors with 0% for 72 months. And other great deals at Sports Talk Mississippi live at Scruggs Farm Lawn and Garden in Saltillo, Mississippi. And then Middays, we're going to be live tomorrow from the South Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland. The Madison County Economic Development Authority will be discussing how they recruit and retain industries in the area, helping create thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in investment. Looking forward to that tomorrow. Little Birdie told me there might be a little announcement coming as part of that event as well. And then two music giants, Post Malone and Jelly Roll, will be making a stop at Vaught Hemingway Stadium on the Ole Miss campus on Friday, June 5th. Joining them in Oxford will be country music singer Carter Faith. Go to supertalk.fm to find a registration location near you. The giveaway is brought to you by Legacy GMC in Laurel, Mississippi. So there you go. The C Spire text line again, 601-879-4395. Been talking this morning about the big news overnight, the ceasefire that the president announced. He said that most of the points in the 15-point plan, the proposal he delivered to the regime, were accepted. That's what he said. And thus he called off what he had described as ending civilization, if you will, the day before, or I guess it was Sunday, as I recall, or Monday. I'm getting confused. Sunday, that's when the tweet came out, the truth, on Truth Social. He was mad, wanted the strait open. Included some profanity in that particular post. It was Monday. It's when he gave the 48 hours, I believe, and basically warned that there would be the end of civilization if they didn't open up the strait and comply with the proposal that he had provided, he had submitted to them on ending the situation. So that's where we are, and the markets are reacting very positively to that news of ending, or at least implementing a ceasefire. Sounds pretty good in that respect. He said a whole civilization will die tonight. That was the ultimatum he issued regarding opening up the Strait of Hormuz. And that instilled, we should say, several lawmakers on the left to call for the 25th Amendment, invoke it to remove Trump from office. Interesting. Several members of Congress and the Senate. And J.B. Pritzker, the governor of the state of Illinois, as well, he also posted that on his social media, calling for Trump to be removed from office via the 25th Amendment. Many of them described his rhetoric as unhinged, disturbing, and dangerous. And that, see, this is where they get wrong, though. Threatening to wipe out a civilization constitutes a war crime? Don't think so. But again, does this not go back, Rhino, to Democrats who believe that just the spoken word, the written word itself, is in fact violence to them? It's not. At the
same time, silence is violence.
It's true. Correct. Exactly right. So
it's almost like they're ate up with circular logic.
Not only that,
logic they even try to apply.
I agree. This does not rise to the level of a war crime, simply issuing such a threat. Now, carrying that out, maybe. I don't know. It's complicated. But certainly just writing it, no, I don't think that measures up to the standards of a war crime. Can't really say that. But that's what they want, and of course they're just eating up with it in a big sort of way. Jason in Brookhaven says, but to the Democrats, Iran can chant death to America all day long and nothing seems to bother them. Oh, in that case, First Amendment, right? That's what they'll say. But God forbid you mispronoun somebody. Off with your head. I mean, that literally is the double standard, as you like to say. That's the only standard they have. But I'm not exaggerating that. There are all kinds of consequences and punishments for misgendering someone. It makes huge news. But chanting death to America on American streets, college campuses, oh, no, that's free expression. It's like there's this selective, convenient application of our law, of our rights. It's all for political power. Lisa in Clara, Mississippi, my analogy of what Trump did was like playing poker and wanting to win. You bluff. I think a lot of that is true. And again, I found the language somewhat harsh as well. But this is who the man is. I get it. This is his personality. Not for 1 minute did I think he was actually gonna, as you said, launch a nuclear strike and commence to nuclear Armageddon of the country of Iran. Not 1 minute. I think we should take him seriously, but not literally. I think we've learned that. But the best part of it, in my view, is that the regime, they were scratching their head. What if he really means this? What if he means that? Knowing that they'd be the first to go, as I said earlier, and I think that served as very strong motivation for them to have an epiphany, shall we say. And that's what's happened. I pray that this thing sticks, that, in fact, we get more detailed report of the accomplishments of the brilliant United States military, the most powerful on the planet, the most skilled, the most professional, the bravest. And like the president said, extracting these two airmen out of the middle of Iran, as he said, we don't leave anybody behind, and we don't. That's the difference in this country and others. And we put forth all the resources, all the brain power, all of the assets we have, combined all of them to achieve what is really just mind-boggling they were able to do to get these two. And what also it tells us, does it not, is the incompetence of the, if you could call it that, what's left of the military of Iran, that they were able to escape and find themselves a location.
Yeah, I mean, people have been trying to geolocate where the weapons officer was hiding on the mountain. And if the estimations are accurate, then they were within spitting distance of a city of 100,000 people.
Incredible. Just unbelievable. That's just gross incompetence on their part. But we shouldn't be surprised. On the C Spire text line, Louis from the 662 says, the only segment of the U.S. population that, in the eyes of the left, it's okay to offend are the Christians. Man, it sure seems like that sometimes. Louis, I tend to agree with you. Of course, they will always tell you that there's no war on Christianity. You're overblowing this. But there just seems to be example after example where they go out of their way to suppress anything related to the Christian faith.
Well, if you want to look at the double standard of how society and media in general treat the religions, you can look at the comparison between Christianity and Islam. On South Park, there's a character named Jesus Christ that's a caricature of Jesus Christ that makes fun of Jesus Christ on a regular basis. The creators of South Park put together one episode where they animated Muhammad from the Islamic religion, and they got death threats.
Unbelievable. Well, that pretty much...
And that episode basically banned.
So it is true. We got something on the C Spire text line. Israel bombed a refinery before Iran launched attacks. This was concerning the timing of the ceasefire and the president's announcement. Israel is also carpet bombing Lebanon civilians right now. I don't know about Lebanon civilians. I do know that they are attacking in a big way the country of Lebanon, really across the country. Al Jazeera is reporting that there are 112 who have been killed in their devastating attacks across the country. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Hey, this is Bob.
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge. Huge news. Huge news. Huge.
You need to listen to this.
MidDays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. So, Rhino was just telling me about Lawrence O'Donnell. Let's see, is he at MSNBC or NBC?
MS Now.
MS Now, right. Used to be MSNBC, MS Now. And he wasn't too happy about the Secretary of Wars. We were just, Pete Hegseth, we were just talking about how it seems like the Democrats, they're just totally obsessed with and find the pronouncing one as just a major deal. And he proves it. O'Donnell here has it, and Rhino's going to play the audio.
That brilliant rescue was described by the Secretary of Defense and by General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as a long-standing American military rule of never leaving anyone behind.
We leave no man behind.
That is, of course, the old-school version of the idea back when only men flew American military planes. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, put it this way.
We leave no one behind.
The general knows, unlike Pete Hegseth, that could have been a woman they were trying to rescue, and it might be a woman the next time.
Oh, my gosh. Why?
But I bet you this mealy-mouthed midwit couldn't define what a woman is, at least not in public.
Why, oh, why are we so obsessed with this and tied up like a pretzel?
Because the talking heads in mainstream media are way too self-important.
I think that's right. And that would describe Lawrence O'Donnell, the august journalist. It's just unbelievable. I'm quite sure that's what Secretary Hegseth was thinking about. Just ignoring the possibility that this could have been a female pilot. Just ignoring it, yeah. And that if it were a female pilot, we would have not reacted the way we did. We would have not mobilized all of our resources to extract them and rescue them and recover them. That's what he's trying to say. That, yeah, these people on the right, they view women as second-class citizens. Therefore, they're not entitled to the same treatment. That's just such craziness. Total. Is that all you can find, by the way? That's the only thing you can find? Is that?
I think that's how he ended his show. He wanted to make a point.
I got you. Well, that's just foolish, honestly. It's so insignificant. It's so irrelevant to the main point here. The main thing being the main thing. You just missed it there, buddy.
It's not an uncommon occurrence for the talking heads in mainstream media.
No, I know, and that's sad.
It's the same reason you haven't heard about the various countries that have been allowed to transit the Strait of Hormuz after all these different deadlines Trump's put up, because you can't give Trump any victories.
That's so true.
I mean, after the latest deadline before this one, Japan was allowed to transit the strait.
Yeah, they sure were. And now they're saying, as of 15, 20 minutes ago, they said because Israel is violating the conditions of the ceasefire by attacking targets in Lebanon specifically, they're at war with Hezbollah, that they're suspending tanker traffic through the strait and considering pulling out of the deal. I just don't think that's going to happen. Wall Street must have not have got the message because it's not affecting the markets at this point. And this is literally hot off the press. This released at 12:10 our time, so 15 minutes or so ago. We shall see, but I don't feel like this is going to significantly endanger this agreement at this point. Robert and Brandon, does he not know that the military knew exactly who was down, whether it was a man or a woman? They already knew. They didn't need to go find the soldier to figure it out 100%. This was all done using technology that is expressly designed for this purpose. We've had it for a while, but it's advanced significantly.
And there is some debate around the technology used to find the weapons officer. The pilot was found relatively quickly by some helicopters that were shot at.
Yep.
And after that, they realized, okay, we can't just send the choppers in. We got to do this a different way. And that's when they started amassing over 100 commandos and set up the, what do they call it, a FARP, forward refueling point or something like that. But they The standard procedure is they've got a little device with them that gives information to the military hiding in the background noise. And that's the presumed method that was used because it's the one that everybody kind of knows about. I mean, there are publicly available pictures of the device that they use. There's scuttlebutt that's been going around that part of the CIA's involvement, because they were involved in the effort to find the weapons officer, because it took so long, they were putting out misinformation in Iran. It's likely that allies communicating with the CIA were trying to help in Iran. And the scuttlebutt is that the CIA has some sort of technology that would allow them to hear a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And analyze that heartbeat and compare it to known heartbeats of the service members, like a fingerprint, and find them that way. That hasn't been confirmed in any way, but that's been the rumor that's been going around the last 24, 48 hours.
That's just incredible.
I think they call it a ghost murmur.
That's unbelievable. Larry says on the C Spire text line, Neil Armstrong's message on the moon, one small step for man, etc. Was that disrespectful to women? These folks are crazy. Yeah, I agree, Larry. Again, there's just too much focus on that, and it seems to be infused into so much of our society as relevant as far as the use of these words specifically I'm talking about. And that's just crazy, in my opinion. I happen to have two names that get mispronounced all the time. I don't get upset about it. I mean, it's just not that big a deal. And I often won't even correct people unless they're going to keep having to say it in a public. I want to correct them for that, and in a respectful, nice way. I get it. It's just normal. It's not a big deal. And it's not intentionally, in the case of the Secretary of War here, again, ignoring women and their service in our armed forces. It's just not happened to be. It's two males that were down. Good grief, man.
But you can't expect someone like Lawrence O'Donnell to put aside their TDS in favor of the truth.
I know. That's sad. On the C Spire text line, remember when Dem said Trump admired dictators and he wanted to be like them? Let's see what else we got. Does he not know that the military knew, so Robert and Brandon, exactly who was down, whether it was a man or a woman? They already knew. They didn't need to go find the soldier to figure it out. Good point. Of course they did, Robert. It's a great point. So on the C Spire text line, talking about increasing the tax rates. In the 70s and 80s, the highest marginal tax rate exceeded 50%. That created an incentive for some high earners to seek investments that lost money. Most years, in order to reduce their total tax burden, they created bubbles in real estate and other investments that generated losses. When the tax rates were finally reduced, the value of real estate crashed. It caused many businesses to fail, causing terrible unemployment, which disproportionately impacted the least fortunate. If Dems truly care for workers, they should be cautious about calling for large tax rate increases. Yeah, all good points, and that's absolutely right. So-called tax shelters, as they were referred to. And so, Rhino, in the early days of spreadsheets, literally. Excuse me, I had to take some water. Lotus 1-2-3, before there was Microsoft Excel. And I was literally one of the few people in town that knew how to operate spreadsheet software in the early 80s because it was brand new. Accounting firms didn't even have it at that point. Brand new. And before that, it was VisiCalc. But I remember being asked by some local accounting firms to help put models together for their clients that involve what he's talking about back in those years. And all that really means is that they would generate cash flow, but a loss for tax purposes, something the Democrats just don't even want to talk about. And yeah, so it was the double benefit of, well, I'm getting cash, plus I'm reducing my tax bill as well, all in the same investment because of depreciation and non-cash expenses. I'm getting wonky a little bit. But, yeah, I do remember that, and I do remember the real estate fallout after all that changed. Coming right back.
From the MidDays with Gerard.
Good for America.
Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
So, Rhino just sent me a clip here. Ro Khanna. He was on CNBC yesterday, and they were pinning him down. He, of course, represents Silicon Valley. He may have more millionaires in his district than someone who represents the heart of New York. And my guess is, I haven't looked at the way the districts are drawn, that Manhattan, where you got a lot of wealth, a big concentration of wealth, and they're in very tall buildings. So you got a lot of population that occupies a small space, footprint physically on the surface. He may have more in his district. Bunch of young, wealthy people in Silicon Valley there. So I didn't know he was getting behind the idea of a wealth tax. We were talking about that, of course, earlier, but you want to play that for us? Yeah.
You have Hassan Piker on it. You don't dissociate yourself from a clear anti-Semite. You go on his Twitch feeds all the time. You have no problem with shutting down. Now you're for a wealth tax, which you were never before. All your constituents counted on you not to go there, and you're going there. It just looks like you are appeasing the left flank of the Democratic Party right now, just for votes, just for ends to justify the means. So go over each one. Why would you not dissociate yourself from Hassan Piker? Why?
Well, first of all, I have gone on every media podcast.
Unbelievable. So, and that's a big problem, is it not? Have any Democrats, to your knowledge, Rhino, denounced, disassociated, the term word there, but the term used there, in that interview on CNBC? It was a sort of a panel discussion type interview. It's not unusual, but I don't hear them ever denounce acts of anti-Semitism from Democrats. There may be. I just can't remember. I do clearly remember after the situation in Israel a couple of years ago, when protests broke out across college campuses, really heavily concentrated in the Ivy League, and those august institutional leaders were summoned to Congress to testify about that. And they wouldn't do it there either, would they? That's when Elise Stefanik, I don't remember exactly how it went down, but she asked a very direct question to one of those Ivy League school leaders. I want to say it was the MIT president, but it could have been one of the others. And she asked the direct question about interfering with the education of Jewish people on their college campus, and people protesting around her campus with these anti-American slurs and chants, and if that would be okay, and do they support and condone that kind of behavior? And you remember she hesitated, and it depends on the context. Remember that? And Representative Elise Stefanik from New York says, no, it does not. I think it was Harvard, because she's a Harvard grad, and I think she was genuinely embarrassed at the reaction. I'm digging up some old stuff, but it's more evidence and more examples of how the left in this country just can't say anything negative or in any way that repudiates and rebukes those that spout all this anti-Semitism. They just can't do it.
Well, this particular example, Ro Khanna going on Hassan Piker's Twitch stream. Hassan Piker is an influencer that he's one of the ones that took the trip to Cuba and threw the concert, and it wound up turning off the power for the hospitals and all that. But yeah, he's a dyed-in-the-wool communist, which is ironic because his parents are wealthy. But he's also come under fire for using a shock collar on his dog to keep the dog in frame so that he can garner more, I guess, viewers to watch his dog. I don't know. He's a terrible human being that Ro Khanna should easily be able to go, no, I don't want to associate with you anymore, but he can't because he's beholden to the far left crazies of the Democrat Party, just like every other idiotic politician with a D by their name.
Paul and Meridian, same story, different day. Democrats, once again, have no common sense. I agree. Let's see.
And they're just some of the most worthless people on the planet.
It just feels like it. Mose, by the way, says, had the WSO been a female, they would have been an even larger force go in to get her. You may be right, Mose. Hadn't thought about that. I just think that no way in a million years would you convince me, despite what goofy Lawrence O'Donnell says, that we would take a different approach, that we wouldn't put our full effort and use all of our resources and assets to get an American service member recovered. There's no way. And is that not what he's sort of implying there, Rhino, to some extent? Feels like it. I think they seem to think they get some sort of perverse political capital, political
I think he's
gain.
just an overly feminized man that can't think with logic and only thinks with emotion.
That's also the other possibility. Yeah, I totally agree. Thomas in Greenwood, I just got to ask you a question here, Thomas. Have you ever said anything positive? I don't feel like it. Feels like it's always negative. And I get the feeling with respect to this conflict in Iran, you're like rooting like the Democrats for us to fail. You want to see Trump fail. And you're celebrating what is the latest news. That's the feeling. I may be wrong here. It just feels like it. That Iran is talking about retaliating against Israel because they continue to bomb Hezbollah in Lebanon. And they're basically saying that this country can't control Netanyahu. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but my guess is the president's having a discussion with Netanyahu. I got to believe that the administration is aware of what's going on with respect to Israel and their continuation of military action in the region, and that how that could put at risk the ceasefire and potentially close the strait. I think all that's in play, personally. And they're working on that. I can't speak on behalf of Netanyahu and Israel, but I tend to land on the optimistic side of the ledger. That doesn't mean I ignore reality or risk. Of course not. And with respect to your comment about the midterms, I have concerns about the midterms. I had concerns about the midterms before the war, because generally speaking, the midterms usually go in favor, certainly in the House, of the party that doesn't have control of the White House. That's how it works historically. The country has a tendency to gravitate back towards the center with respect to the balance of power in Washington. Intentionally, I believe. That's why we go every 2 years between a presidential cycle, election cycle. I think that was all by design. Got to turn the crops in the House. And the Senate is supposed to be a little more stable. I also think that there are, last I checked, you might want to check me on this, Rhino, 30 seats, Senate seats, is that right? It's either 30 or 23. The number 3 sticks in my head there. And how that breaks down among Democrats defending those seats versus Republicans from what party currently holds those seats. What do you see?
It's 33 out of 100.
Okay. 33 are being contested this fall in the U.S. Senate. And that's like 23 to 10, something like that. The difference between the Democrat and the Republicans, what they currently hold of those 33. And so there are reports that the National Republican, I think it's called the National Republican Senatorial Committee, is investing significant dollars in about 8 of those races that they see as very competitive. I think you're going to see a massive amount of money flowing into the elections this fall. And I'll say again, it just illustrates to me that sends the message that we
35, I was wrong.
35, okay.
There's 33 Class 2 Senate seats up for election and 2 Class 3 Senate seats up for election.
And explain to folks what the difference between the classes are.
It's just the breakdown of the 100 seats.
Okay.
It's the name given to the electoral terms.
Yeah. I ran across that the other day, and I got to tell you, I never heard of that terminology before, the classes. And never really thought about that and went down the rabbit hole on that. It's just fascinating.
Think of it like the classes in like a high school, like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior.
Yeah.
Those groups are lumped together by the year they came in.
Not to be confused with class representing like the level of it's still 100. They all got the same. Yeah, it has to do with when they came in.
And there's 22 Republicans and 13 Democrats.
Okay, well I was close on that. So but 8 of them are considered highly competitive, and you're going to see a bunch of money poured into that. Coming right back, final segment.
Hey, this is Bob, and if you're like...
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Jim in the Delta says, I have watched Ro Khanna on numerous podcasts and also listened to him on your show. He seems to lean towards whoever is interviewing him at the time, wishy-washy. And there's talk that he might be a candidate for president of these United States. And, you remember I met him at the inauguration. I just ran into him in a restaurant not far from the Capitol. We were on our way to visit with Congressman Michael Guest, my wife and I, some friends, and to receive a personally guided tour by the congressman. And he recommended this little restaurant that many of them frequent right close to the Capitol there for breakfast. Went there, and there was Ro Khanna, and I just went over and introduced myself. Talked to him, and then you remember a few months later, we actually had him on the show. He's usually a pretty rational person, but on this matter, and it may be, Rhino, because he's planning to run for president. And the way you run for office as a Democrat is you got to go out there and smear Donald Trump. Raise taxes and smear Donald Trump. That's literally their campaign strategy. I see nothing else. Nothing else coming out of them. And they've got everybody tricked into believing that, we can't afford health care subsidies, but we can afford bombs. They're just, first, this idea of can afford is a ruse because, as we've said so many times, if we passed appropriations bills on the basis of what we could afford, we wouldn't have $39 trillion of debt. And I'm talking to both parties in that respect. That's the first crazy thing. And the second thing is, you may disagree with this action in Iran, but I believe that a core function of government is to protect the country and to defend the nation, not enhance subsidies in the ACA exchanges. Do you see how far we've drifted from the original premise of government? Wasn't supposed to be that, but that's what it's turned into. And that's what they focus on. We could have this and daycare and childcare and subsidies and they just go down this litany. No, it's not a one versus the other. It's just what's good policy and what's not.
And don't you dare try to root out fraud.
Oh, exactly. Got to look the other way.
Because if you really want to look at dollars and cents, the amount of money that's been stolen from taxpayers in the state of California alone would have paid for everything that's happened in Iran 4 times over with a couple billion left.
Okay, and I totally agree. And then layer onto that the amount of money the taxpayers bear to cover the various benefits received by illegals. That's a massive number. That's estimated to be like $350, $400 billion all in state and federal. We don't talk about that, though. Do they not realize that, well, maybe if you didn't just open the doors wide open, we'd have more money to take care of the truly needy American citizens? No, it's always, we got to go get more money from the most successful in society. We got to get it from them. And it's not because they truly would put it to good use. It's because they get some sort of perverse political benefit by taking a pound of flesh. And they've ginned up this attitude in this country that their enemy are the most successful in our country. They literally have. It's James Tallarico running in Texas for Senate. This isn't about the left versus the right, he says. This is about us versus the billionaires. Huh? While using, again, much of what they created to promote your twisted narrative. Incredible. Positive note, whoever picks the intro music gets my appreciation and approval. Thanks, guys. Well, the Journey tunes you hear at the top of the hour to lead us into those segments, I selected. Rhino, on the other hand, picks all the bumper music that goes in and out of the segments, and I agree. He does an excellent job on that, and we appreciate that. I can't tell you, Rhino, the number of people I hear out there in public say, love your show, especially like the music. Hey, what about me? No, it's great. That's why we say at the top of the show, facts, fodder, and fine music. That's what makes it. Agree. Makes it fun. So there was another one. Ronnie from Ackerman says, I know this is off topic a bit, but as we close out today, happy to go there, Ronnie, for you. How much money the government took in from lottery taxes on winnings? Well, I don't know what the actual amount of the taxes are on those winnings, but I will tell you this, that unless you win a single prize that exceeds $600, you don't even get a 1099. So only when that prize exceeds $600, do you have to redeem that prize directly with the lottery corporation, either via mail or in person, and you're going to get what's called a 1099-G and pay your taxes, federal taxes, taxed at ordinary income, state taxes. I would have to say that it's probably not that much. I could kind of guess just based on knowledge of the top line revenue minus the prizes paid and what's left over from that, $6 to $10 million off the top of my head, 3%. Out of here today, Madison tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.